Imagine sailing across a cold, foggy ocean more than 1,000 years ago. The wind is harsh, the sea is unpredictable, and ahead lies a massive island covered mostly in ice. Now, imagine someone looking at that frozen land and saying, "Let's call it Greenland." It sounds almost like a joke. How could one of the iciest places on Earth have a name that suggests lush fields and green landscapes? The answer takes us back to the dramatic story of a Viking explorer, a clever marketing trick, and a bold attempt to build a new society at the edge of the known world. Let's explore, right here, on History of Simple Things. The story begins with a man known as Erik the Red, a Viking explorer born in Norway around the 10th century. His real name was Erik Thorvaldsson, but he earned the nickname the Red, likely because of his bright red hair and beard, and perhaps also because of his fiery temper. Erik had a reputation for getting into violent disputes, and after a conflict that resulted in several deaths, he was sentenced to exile from Iceland for 3 years around 982 AD. Instead of simply waiting out his punishment, Erik decided to explore the seas west of Iceland, where sailors had rumored that land existed beyond the horizon. Setting sail into the unknown, Erik eventually reached a vast island in the North Atlantic. The coastline he encountered was harsh and rugged, with towering cliffs and massive glaciers. But as he explored further along the southwestern coast, he discovered something surprising. During the summer months, parts of the land actually became green. The fjords and valleys were filled with grasses and small plants, making them suitable for grazing animals and possibly farming. Compared to the rocky volcanic landscape of Iceland, these areas must have looked promising. Erik spent several years exploring and surviving on the island while he waited for his exile to end. When he finally returned to Iceland, he began telling people about the new land he had discovered. But Erik didn't just describe the place honestly as a cold and distant island. Instead, he gave it a name that would make people curious and hopeful: Greenland. According to medieval Icelandic sagas, Erik deliberately chose this appealing name because he believed it would encourage more settlers to join him. As one account famously explains, he said people would be more eager to move there if the land had a good name. In other words, the name Greenland may have been one of the earliest examples of clever advertising in history. By suggesting fertile land and opportunity, Erik hoped to convince families to take the risky journey and build a new community there. Surprisingly, the strategy worked. When Erik organized an expedition to colonize the island around 985 AD, several ships full of settlers followed him across the sea. Not all of them made it. Storms wrecked some ships along the way, but enough people arrived to establish the first Norse settlements in Greenland. These communities were mainly located along the southwestern coast, where the climate was slightly milder and farming was possible during the brief summers. Life in Viking Greenland was far from easy. The settlers raised sheep, goats, and cattle, grew small crops like barley, and relied heavily on hunting and fishing. They traded goods such as walrus ivory and animal skins with Europe, which helped their remote settlements survive for several centuries. At its peak, the Norse population in Greenland may have reached several thousand people living in scattered farms along the fjords. However, the island's environment remained harsh and unpredictable. Over time, temperatures in the North Atlantic began to drop during a period sometimes called the Little Ice Age. As the climate cooled, farming became more difficult, sea ice increased, and trade routes with Europe grew unreliable. By the 1400s, the Norse settlements had mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind ruins that still puzzle historians today. Despite the disappearance of the Viking colonies, the name Greenland endured. Today it remains the official English name of the world's largest island. Yet, interestingly, the people who live there don't usually call their country Greenland at all. In the Greenlandic Inuit language, the island is known as Kalalit Nunaat, which means land of the people. This name reflects the culture and identity of the Inuit communities who have lived there for centuries. Another fascinating twist is that Greenland is not entirely covered in ice. While about 80% of the island is buried beneath a massive ice sheet, the coastal areas, especially in the south, do turn green during the summer. Grasslands, wildflowers, and low shrubs appear when the snow melts, just as Erik the Red may have seen over 1,000 years ago. So although the name might sound misleading, it isn't completely inaccurate. The story of Greenland's name also highlights an interesting contrast with its neighbor Iceland. Many people joke that the two islands should have swapped names since Iceland has green landscapes while Greenland is mostly icy. But the truth is more complicated. Iceland was already settled and named before Erik the Red arrived, and its name came from early explorers who encountered drifting sea ice near the coast. Greenland's name, meanwhile, was shaped by a mixture of observation, ambition, and a bit of clever persuasion. In the end, the name Greenland is a reminder that history is not always straightforward. Sometimes it's influenced by human storytelling, ambition, and even marketing. Over 1,000 years ago, a determined Viking exile looked at a remote Arctic island and decided that a simple name could change its destiny. Whether he meant it as truth, exaggeration, or pure optimism, that name has survived the centuries. And today, whenever we look at a map and see the word Greenland, we're actually seeing the legacy of one man's bold idea, a name chosen not just to describe a place, but to inspire people to believe in it. Thank you for watching. If you have suggestions for our next video, feel free to share them in the comments below. We'll be sure to give you an acknowledgement for your contribution. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the history of simple things. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories woven through the smallest details.